gonna do a video about The Green Knight as a whole, seeing as how so far it's really the only movie to come out this year that I've been a big fan of. I liked the meditative approach to fantasy, a story about a knight's quest with virtually no fighting, and yet you still feel the grand scope of the quest just from the atmospheric set pieces, and it really homes in on the thematic weight of the story, seemingly prioritizing theme over narrative. People can debate whether the shot composition is just A24 Instagram bullshit, or if it really taps into the internal journey going on, whether the blue shadows are appropriate for a movie called The Green Knight. I don't really care. I liked it, that's my take. But of course, as an adaptation of an already widely adapted opus, there are certain decisions made here that I think warrant the focus of our discussion. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, or rather Sir Garwin and the Green Knight, famously breezes from Gawain embarking on his quest to him rolling up at the castle, at which point it goes into elaborate detail outlining the Lord's hunting techniques. Obviously that's not in the movie, and in this section originally breezed over, we get a few episodes demonstrating cowardice, attempts at chivalry, and some other knightly shit. These are probably the biggest inventions of the film, but what I want to talk about is a moment at the very end that's virtually not very different at all from the original story, but functionally changes a lot of the subtext. Originally, after sharing a series of smooches with the Lord and the Lady, Gawain acquires the magic sash and heads to the Green Chapel, and he still flinches and demonstrates cowardice, but the real moral is when he does get chopped, and it's just a gash in his neck for trying to conceal the sash. Then it turns out the Green Knight is the Lord, and it was all a test, and the two have a laugh, and Gawain is ashamed of the cowardice he displayed by wearing the sash, but then continues to wear the sash as a token of his failure, even though it would still protect him and preserve the benefits of the cowardice, unless it was never actually enchanted and that was just part of the test. I don't know, it kinda goes off the rails there. But this ultimately renders the story a lighthearted morality tale, the moral being captured in this slap on the wrist, so Gawain can return to Camelot and the Arthurian legends can continue. The Green Knight, however, is a standalone story, actively avoiding any monikers that tie this IP to the King Arthur franchise, the KACU. And as such, David Lowery is able to apply more gravitas to the situation, because there is no grander scale this story would affect. This is everything. So instead of getting off scot-free and pointing out what Gawain did wrong, the film puts the impetus on Gawain to act bravely, to have an active arc instead of just learning his lesson after doing the wrong thing and being taught otherwise. The one change I'm referring to is having him take off the sash before letting the Green Knight hack him up. In many ways, the film is able to sort of have its cake and eat it this way, so we see the fallout of the cowardice. In this hypothetical, Gawain just runs away instead of relying on the sash to protect him, but he continues to wear the sash when he returns, not as a token of his failure, but as a continuation of his cowardice. This is his lifeline, and we watch it consume him. Then, after seeing the bad ending, so to speak, we cut back to Gawain, and he's still able to make an active, dramatic decision, and the conclusion that punctuates the film is that he makes the brave and moral choice. Maybe this hypothetical flash forward is itself a bit of a cop-out, but I think it's less of a cop-out than what originally happens. Ending the film on such a precise note reminds me of the way Eric Romer will spend an entire film building to a specific action, or decision, or object, or phenomenon that single-handedly embodies the entire thematic scope of the film, and once that thing happens, the movie just ends. Which is a little ironic, because Romer's own take on Arthurian myth is one of the few instances where he doesn't quite take this approach. But something like the Green Ray is a little more like the Green Knight, and how the latter imbues the green sash, and Gawain's decision to wear it, with implications on his entire philosophy. That's not to say the original plotting doesn't make a symbol out of the sash, of course, it does so quite explicitly. But in being more explicit, it feels more removed from the contents of the story, less narratively embedded. And maybe some of this is a matter of modernized narrative trends, pulling out of a story in the thick of it rather than using a storybook framing, and as a person who is alive right now, I'm naturally more inclined to resonate with the modern approach. But I think this change does more than just affect narrative structure. I guess what I don't understand about the original story is how Gawain's action is noble aside from the minor detail of wearing an invincibility sash. I guess it still takes bravery to put your head on a chopping block, but if anything, the action is more a test of Gawain's blind faith in the sorcery of the sash than his general bravery, so I don't really know how he could pass the test without removing it. There's a tension throughout the whole story, and I guess throughout all chivalric tales, between self-preservation and chivalry, whatever that word really means. It's stupid to travel a week out to voluntarily have your head chopped off, but, you know, there are certain situations where it would be wrong not to. So the original scenario, where Gawain still acts out of self-preservation, just doesn't sit right with me. But Lowry's rendition doesn't just give Gawain a more active decision between self-preservation and chivalry, it opens up a sort of paradox in the situation that the original story kind of avoids. What Gawain sees is the consequence of acting cowardly and pretending to have acted bravely. Had he returned, having actually acted bravely, maybe things would go differently for him. He at least wouldn't be as consumed by the sash and obsessed with self-preservation, but as it plays out in the film, the only way for him to act bravely or nobly or greatly is to get his head chopped off good and clean, which he probably wouldn't be able to return from. This is why the choice to take off the sash is so dramatic, but the film does one more thing. We get a post-credits scene with a baby playing with the crown, which is given no context, but we can infer that this implies Gawain's return and eventual noble status. Whether or not this is the intended canon is honestly kind of irrelevant. So let's examine every possible outcome. The original ending. Gawain gets a gash for wearing the sash, but passes the test and returns to Camelot having achieved greatness. This is probably the best case scenario for him, though he has the minor shame of wearing the sash. The movie's fake-out ending. Gawain runs away and lives in fear. His life sucks and he dies in shame. This is the worst case scenario. What the movie implies before the credits. Gawain removes the sash and gets his head chopped off. He dies, which isn't fun, but at least he did the noble thing. Now, what the post-credits scene implies. Gawain removes the sash and lives, presumably having been part of a test after all. This is an interesting one, because what about his future is different? He still inherits the throne, maybe he leads with more dignity and doesn't become disgraced, but upholding chivalric tradition, would he still ditch Essel for a proper lady? I genuinely don't know, but considering chivalry itself is a somewhat arbitrary concept with aspects that prove troublesome when followed dogmatically, I wouldn't put it past them to still require a knight and rising king to marry someone of higher nobility. This is why Essel asks him if greatness is so great, one of the film's biggest thematic questions. In context, she's referring to the chivalric stupidity of venturing out to die, but stretching that line of thought out, we can also see for this reason why she'd be wary of greatness. And it's really with Essel that we see the only humanity in Gawain, so even if he lived an otherwise noble life, sacrificing this relationship would still cost him everything that really mattered to him. The other possible outcomes pretty much fall into the same general string of events we've already covered. Say he keeps the sash on, but it's not a test. He either still goes on to live in cowardice under the protection of the sash, or the Green Knight keeps hounding him until he takes the sash off. So I think every possible outcome kinda sucks. Life in Camelot kinda sucks once you're a knight, so it's no wonder the knights are all about venturing out and getting themselves killed. And aside from the moral factors Gawain bases his ultimate decision on, I think he's also sort of processed this, that there's no way his life doesn't suck after this. He's dreamt his whole life about going on adventures and achieving greatness, and once he's at the threshold, he asks the primordial question.
Is this really all there is?
What else ought there be?
There's an ironic catharsis, then, to being gifted with life only after letting go of it and embracing death. Maybe that's nobility. What I especially like about this notion of Gawain weighing all his options in this way is that it of course applies directly to the story and character arc we're watching, but it also keeps this rendition of the Green Knight in conversation with the original text, despite how much it often deviates, and in many ways embodies and pays direct tribute to how widely interpreted the story is. I've covered like 4 potential scenarios, with their own forking outcomes with both narrative and thematic implications stemming from a single moment in the film. There's so much other shit the movie provides that we could do this about. The Freudian implications of the sash originally coming from Gawain's mother and then from the lady, who's identical to Essel, how much of the story actually was preordained by Morgan Le Fay, but clearly this video isn't about any of that stuff, so I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. Let me know your reading of the scene, if there's any outcome I hadn't considered, or if you have a different takeaway from any of the outcomes I did. Like, share, comment, subscribe, turn on notifications, and let me know what you're having for dinner. I'm probably gonna go with a chicken parm, but hey, that's just me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Et tout être de joie.